Mirror's Edge is an action platformer developed by DICE and published by EA. It came out on Xbox and PlayStation 3 in 2008 and PC in 2009. You control Faith, who is a rebellious runner in a society full of bigwigs and CEOs. Your goal is to transmit secret messages, and you do that in the coolest way possible by jumping across rooftops, sliding down zip lines, and falling off nearly impossible heights. So, Mirror's Edge, guys. This was a game that I had heard a lot about, or a lot of people talking about it, how fun it is, how good it looks. When talking about parkour, there were always two games that I heard in conversation. That was Assassin's Creed and Mirror's Edge. So I'd never played it. The only exposure I had personally was my sister's boyfriend at the time. I hated his guts. And he was like, Mirror's Edge is awesome. And I was like, well, I hate you, so it probably sucks. So I never played it. So, but I obviously now I have played it.
I had a PS3, I think twice in its generation, but only like for about a year at a time, and not really diving into it. It was kind of the time where I wasn't gaming as much. But this game had come out when I did have a PS3 for the first time. And as you said, Joshua, I think the marketing campaign for this game was very strong. And I think it's strong because it is so visually striking. In a time where there are a lot of first-person shooters and a lot of brown, grey games about like war and guns and stuff like that, this just stood out like a candle in the night. And so I did get it, and I played through, I think, maybe 2 chapters with my friend, and then fell off of it for whatever reason. Never came back to it, which is why I picked it for this episode. And I'm also playing it on the PlayStation 3, as God intended, but with a DualShock 4. So,
not as God intended.
I sin for my for my hobbies.
I remember when the demo came out. It was like a big deal. And I played it. I borrowed it from my friend. And for this, I played the PS3. And I played the PC version, which we'll get into because I have opinions.
This game really had a mixed reception. The good reviews were citing it for just being literally a different game to what has been played before. It took the first person to a completely different place. It was just like no other game that had come out before that time. And in 2008, 2009, that's not happening every day anymore. It's also kind of what we talked about with Prince of Persia, that sort of really simple concept made into a whole game. So people just absolutely I don't think it can be underestimated how impressed people were with the idea of what this game could be. And then all the negative reviews tended to be, this was an incredible premise, it did not deliver, and it should have been better than what it was. This game came out in the late noughties, and I think 2 things sort of coincided that made this game possible, it seems. Parkour just became this massive popular culture thing at the time. Do you remember when all films and stuff had parkour in it, and there was programs about parkour, and you get people doing crazy walks between skyscraper buildings and stuff like that. So it was just present in popular culture, and at the same time DICE were coming off of one Battlefield. So DICE are the developer who known for the Battlefield series, and they were coming off a Battlefield. The majority of their company was owned by EA, and they were about to be fully taken over, but they hadn't been yet, and they had this sort of free little bit of time and enough of a buffer to basically take a chance on a project that's slightly more creative, or it wouldn't be terrible if it failed. And this game was pitched. So, there were also, the development team did have a struggle because it was such a new concept. They had to make sure that it worked. People weren't getting motion sick. People could navigate this world. And just talking on the graphical thing there, one of the things they had to do, which by the way, I did not realize until I looked this up, so I do feel stupid, is use a primary color scheme. everything in this whole world is white, or it's one of the primary colours. It's red, yellow, or blue, which works so effectively. They kept the HUD completely clean, which is something I really appreciate about this game.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
literally no HUD whatsoever.
I mean, you don't really need a HUD, though. She doesn't have a health bar. Having the, screen turn red or whatever it did made more sense.
Let's talk about, I think, the most important thing in this game, which is the gameplay. The parkour. How did you guys find parkour?
All right. Well, before Tony gives his hot take, I thought it was great.
It was amazing.
I thought it was awesome. You can really feel your character building momentum, and just the rush of leaping across rooftops or vaulting over a fence, or you vault and then you jump and then you run up a wall and jump off of it and grab onto something else. There's really good flow. There's really good momentum, and the levels are put together in such a way where you kind of make up your own path. And it feels so great to play at almost all times. When you're doing the parkour, I was just having a blast with it.
I completed this game I think a week or two ago, and I just went back to do some of the time trials just before we recorded, just to give myself a little refresher. And I forgot how much I missed playing in that. The key word for it is flow, isn't it? This game has flow in droves. Flow, that state that video gamers have where everything else melts away and all that is important is what's happening on the stream. And it's like a stream of continuous movement. Musicians get it, athletes get it. This game has it in buckets. I think one criticism would be everything sits on the L1 button. Every jump, skid,
jumping or vaulting or running up the wall.
Yeah, everything. The shoulder buttons relied on most of the main functions. It would be nice if you could have also there's reconfiguring the controllers. You couldn't. There's only two options.
There's two options. There is a left-handed mode, which is mind-blowing because left-hand people have been going since the 80s going, I guess we just play this right-handed then. And then one game decides to go, here's left-handed mode. It's well, no one needs that because everyone's now a right-handed guy.
As a left-handed person, it makes there've been maybe 2 games in my entire life where I'm you know what? This needs a left-handed mode. Mirror's Edge was not that.
I think one of the criticisms of this game, which is slightly fair, is that it could have been slightly more in depth, which is hard because it's the seed of an idea. I think if this had gone on to be a series, they probably would have expanded the parkouring essence, making it all quite simple. The skill of it is finding the routes rather than kind of executing the moves. And I did just feel like a god going through this game. So I don't know if making it more complex would have actually made it better, but that was one of the criticisms, that it was maybe slightly shallow. But amazingly realised, actually makes you feel like you are there. So few times when I play a game in first person do I actually feel like that person, and this was it for me.
I have a slightly opposing view. I had the worst time playing this on the PS3. I also, just to skip ahead a bit, I played in the PC version and it was a better time. Actually, I played the PC version in one sitting. I beat it in 3 hours. But that's besides the point. I just had so many problems with her jumping and not wanting to grab onto things. And there's one part where you're going down, going down the pipe to go into the sewer. The helicopter's over you, and then you had to go. Those pipes, she did not want to grab those pipes. She jumped. I don't know how. I have this gift of hitting every possible bug in the game imaginable. It's happened to me. I've recorded things back in the day and put it on YouTube of me just hitting these weird glitches for no reason. So it's kind of in my blood. Just I mentioned it before in the original Shadow of the Colossus. I was on the last Colossus climbing it and I fell through it for no reason. It happens to me. I have footage of me playing Uncharted 2 and I fell through some gears and I was just stuck in the gears and I had to restart the game. It just happens to me. This girl, she would run, she would jump. Didn't want to grab it. And I thought, okay, maybe it's a me thing. And then I'm trying to use the little dot in the center to do it evenly. She just didn't want to do it. And then when I finally did it, I was trying to do, the wall run. She didn't want to do it. She just walked off the edge and died. It just kept on happening. Or she would jump and I'd be right in front of the bar properly and she wouldn't grab it. And it just kept on happening to me. Sometimes it wouldn't be that bad because the checkpoints were all right. Sometimes the checkpoints wouldn't be so all right. And I'd have to do entire sessions again. And it just was so frustrating. And that was crazy. So I went on Metacritic and I saw a few other people complaining about it, how, they had a huge issue sometimes of her just not wanting to do things properly. So at least I knew I wasn't going crazy.
This is how I felt when we played Ethan Carter, by the way. I was like, am I just, inept?
so I remember I played this in the PS3 back in the day, I bought it from my friend. And I remember having a similar problems, but it was, I guess this time I just kept on hitting it back to back. Otherwise, when it worked, it was great. I played like I said, I wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy. So I've read a few things online about how people saying that, the console versions have, sometimes responsiveness isn't all that great. And I read a lot of people saying they had problems with her and just not wanting to do certain things. So, okay. Before I go on a wild tangent, let me play the PC version for a little bit. Because I still had some Game Pass left time of it, and it was the Ultimate Game Pass, so I had the EA gameplay, or whatever it's called, the EA Play. And it was available to play, so I downloaded it, and I played it in one sitting. I had a very good time on PC. There was some issues I kind of had, but there's one or two sections that I had issues with. I still kind of had missed it once or twice, the jumps or the responsiveness, but it wasn't nearly as bad. And then after I got past those parts, it was just smooth sailing all the way through. Other issues I had weren't really as apparent or as happened. They either happened very rarely or if not at all, and I had a very good time. I blasted through it and had a very good time. So PS3 version, in my opinion, is probably the worst way to play it.
So that was one half of the parkour, was this sort of traversal. Another part was the sort of puzzle solving bits, which would slow down. They'd often be inside. And at first, I really lamented these parts, just basically because it broke the rhythm, it broke that momentum. But actually, in retrospect, I think they were probably a needed sort of welcome break from... It's hard because I love the sort of free roaming on the rooftops. But I suppose it makes a better mix to have those sort of puzzle elements in as well.
Yeah, it makes a better mix. And while it does break the rhythm a bit, there's a bit of a setup and payoff where you're in the building, you're doing these puzzles, you're kind of moving a bit slower, but the moment you bust a door and you see the light just blast you in the face, and you're like, all right, and the game says, go. So you're in those moments, you're doing your thing, you get through, kick the door, and you got it, and then you're out there leaping across rooftops again. Yeah.
Yeah, I love drop kicking the doors open as I'm running. That was always a good feel.
Yeah, just another thing where every bit of movement felt smooth and flowing. I think we have to talk about the combat. This is one of the larger criticisms of the game. Honestly, I think the combat was a half-baked element of this game, but had the potential to actually be very good in that sort of Prince of Persia way. I think if they had environmental dodges, you could use your parkour to disarm people in a more engaging way. That would have actually been a really good part of this game. As for how it is at the moment, but what you basically have to do is run vulnerably towards anyone with a gun in order to try and disarm them, which is it feels like it's a weirdly powerless part of this game. You have no health whatsoever, so you just like paper thin, you get plowed down. It never felt really good, these parts, and I think that was a missed opportunity. I think they should have done it right rather than gotten rid of it at all.
I was able to avoid a lot of the fights just by running. There's maybe three segments where you have to get a gun. Otherwise, I found ways to just avoid it. I think it was simple enough, but I think the gunplay aspects were kind of maybe something EA told them they had to add. Because it just it didn't, you get these prompts between loading screens saying, avoid combat, avoid fighting, avoid, but then they're saying, okay, well, you can't get past this part because there's 4 guards and you need a gun. So it kind of felt contradictory, especially to the story. Not so much the story, but the general vibe the game had going for it, the themes and everything. I felt the like the force, some of the forced combat just felt wrong for what the game was giving you.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement there. The combat was easily my least favorite part of the game. And at first I was like, oh cool, I can disarm people, but you gotta hit the timing right. And they say, okay, when a guy swings at you and whatever their weapon is flashes red, you hit the button and then you'll disarm them. Cool. Except that's not entirely true, because if you have to hit it like at the start of their animation. If you hit it in the middle or near the end, then the game just says no, you're playing it wrong.
It's such an unforgiving window, isn't it, as well?
Yes, very unforgiving. And the gunplay feels awful.
Why?
I'm just gonna come out
Why
and say
does it feel that bad? They made Battlefield.
It's so bad. Every gun feels the same. There's no weight to them, and the aiming is really clunky, and the punching is stupid. You just kind of like punch, and then they fall.
That's the only part of the first-person animation that looks bad as well. That sort of flailing arms thing.
What I figured out in the PC version was if I just did like a sliding kick, it just made all the comment, and just no matter what it was, either with the guys with the guns, with the soldiers, or with the I guess the quote unquote boss fight, I just kicked them in the crotch and I won every time. Like I didn't even have to fight.
Yeah, anytime I could skip any combat section, I definitely would. And the game outright tells you at the start, you don't have to fight if you don't want to. Cool, awesome. I'll just run past them. And then there are a few sections where you can try to run past them, but you'll probably get killed, because then you run past everybody, then you have to climb up a pipe very slowly, and you're just a target. So you have to do the combat, and I hate it, and I hate it, and I hate it. I hate it. No combat and Mirror's Edge.
I think that the straight chases, it's just nonstop. And I think that was like the highlight of the game, when you get these nonstop runs, and you just have to you're like, oh shit, someone's in front of me. So you like turn the corner, and then you have to slide down something, and then you have to jump on the train. But then you have to dodge the barricades and the signposts in the train, and you have to jump over them and dodge and jump on the next train. I think it was just high momentum. I think those are the best parts.
Yeah, I agree, Tony. There's a lot of running from people. Like, the chases are good, but running from people, and it's not just, oh, you have X thing behind you gotta keep going. You'll be running through a building, you're vaulting over ledges, you're busting through doors, but the whole time you've got people coming from the sides. You get to a new area, more people start spilling out, and it really adds to this frenetic sense of motion where you just gotta keep moving. And the game constantly puts you in these scenarios where you're encouraged to play the game in the best way possible, which is to keep moving, to constantly try and make your way forward or up or down or wherever it is you're trying to go. And yeah, I think both being chased and chasing are really good applications of that.
I think particularly there are segments where these sort of ninja gimps are chasing you in like numbers, and they don't have guns or anything, but you're just having to really quickly go through. Love that. That was fantastic.
They're the ninjas that start parkouring to chase you. And so you have to like plan your route ahead of time and see where you're going to go, or you're going to get caught.
The only time that really failed for me is when it was slightly puzzly, where you had to go and you were being chased by gunfire. And then you could die like 8, 9, 10 times just quickly in a row, because you're not getting that breathing space to work out where it was. But those moments were probably few and far between. Another thing I really appreciate about this game is it's just, they've cut all the fat off it. There's no faff. There's one collectible in the game, which I think is a bag, which you can get free in a level, but who cares about that? There's no upgrading. The upgrading is basically you getting better at this game. It's like that old school style of upgrading, just literally acquiring the skills to play it. So there's no RPG elements. There's no things to invest into.
There's no skill tree.
No, it's just the pure form of what the game is and why it makes it fun. And I think they ride that quite a long way. Well, not that long, because the game's quite short. But I think they do well to stretch that out.
when it works, it really works. I think I think the spiritual successor to this would probably be something like Dying Light, where it's like the mixture of parkour and combat. So I think that's the closest thing I think in recent years.
I need to play Dying Light.
I'm genuinely surprised it's taken this long for another game to come along and do it, because it is such a good concept and it's so gamified. But yeah, I've not played Dying Light either. Looks fun. Probably quite scary.
So, parkour, awesome. The gunplay, the combat, not awesome. You know what else isn't awesome? The story in this game. Let me tell you guys.
Preach.
If you asked me to give you an in-depth synopsis about what this game is, who the major characters are, what their names are, I'd give you a blank stare. Because I wasn't really... It's just totally glazed over every time. The cutscenes were nice, and they were good to look at.
You mean you talking what? Excuse me, the progressive cutscenes for progressive insurance, where I felt like they were trying to sell me car insurance.
I didn't have cable, Tony, so I wouldn't know what that is.
There was no reason for them to not to use the in-game engine for the cutscenes. There was just such nothing to the cutscenes. And the animation was terrible. It looked cheap. It just wasn't necessary. In fact, I would say cut the entire story out and just say this girl has to run from the law because she has information and she just needs to run. That's all you need. You don't need this. My sister's a cop, and then conspiracy, and the mayor's dead, and then his other mayor's trying to kill the other mayor, and it's just like, who cares?
It's like a Max Payne story.
At least Max Payne was like tongue in cheek. This was taken very seriously.
Yeah,
totally uninspired.
They're like, yes, we have the story here, guys, and just I was so bored every cutscene.
Who's that man over there? I'm like, it's obviously a woman, and it's obviously your friend that is betraying you. Like, come on, just
it was either her friend or her sister.
Fuck the story. Press start. Skip it.
There we go. Just play the game. Don't even bother with the story.
I felt such an overwhelming void of nothingness towards this story as I was playing it. The problem with it is it's 100% exposition and no character building whatsoever. There's a twist, literally who cares? I'm unlike UT, I do think it deserves a story. I just think it deserves a better one. Not a heavy one. It doesn't have to be, Horizon or God of War, but it just could have had a nice little story that plodded it along, and this was awful. Faith is the only thing I like about the story, basically. I think she is quite a well-defined character. I know the director wanted a female lead that like men and women could relate to, and he also wanted her to, unlike these sort of action films, to rely on her physical prowess to solve problems rather than sort of high-tech guns and equipment. And I think that is strong, and then everything else is just like a bowl of jelly. It's just wobbly.
Well, the big thing with the character and having a character who relies on this stuff, they don't go out of their way to say, you have like a bodyguard going, how the hell can you beat me? And she goes, 'cause I am a strong woman, and then like punches him. They never go out of their they don't go out of their way to bring attention to it. They just, hey, she's a runner, she can do parkour, she can do combat, she's your character, go. And it's all the better for it, because never once was I like, man, this character's kind of dumb. It's like, nah, this character is awesome.
Yeah, in a dumb world.
In a very dumb world, yeah.
All she's trying to do is survive, which, yeah, but it's just like everything else.
Yeah, hit and a miss.
I mean, I like going to the elevator, and you go in the elevator and you'd read like...
That was the one bit of world building, and it was so welcome.
They'd have like PSAs about identifying runners among your friends and family.
Yeah, there's like five signs that your child's a runner. That
was awesome.
Yeah, that was cool. It was just so many cool little things that they didn't really need all the exposition, because you could... A good way to have them doing it is, have this little story of her, getting from point A to point B for a reason, but then tell the rest of the story just through the environments, which they kind of did.
I actually think the environments look a lot better than the character models. So if they could have, found a way to do the storytelling more so with the environment as opposed to having the characters face to face talking to each other, then I would be more for that.
I mean, well, let's talk about the artistic direction then, and like the environment, because I would argue in some ways they did do some of that storytelling through the environment. I mean, obviously it is like a corporate, minimalist dystopia, and that's exactly what they're going for. It's like had all the soul sucked out of it. There's cameras everywhere. It's high surveillance, and they've kind of expressed that through how sort of clean cut and sort of minimalist everything is in the game. And I kind of swing between that being really appealing. Everything's just bright white, and then these primary colors that are marking your way to go. Red things are where you can sort of utilize those objects. Runner vision, which is used really sparingly, and another way of how the visuals are sort of assisting the gameplay. But another part of me goes, it does look a little bit like a tech demo. I think the second one kind of they kind of hit what I would want it to end up being, the prequel. But on the whole, I just thought like this game has aged so well. Like this game it's the first game we've played that's like a proper old game that I think about other like 2008 games. They just haven't aged this well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes along with how the game just really stuck out even back then, where a lot of the other games that came out just have not aged well. And Mirror's Edge just is very striking. And the environments, the use of color is so good, and the reflection of the color and the layout of each room, the rooftops, you can almost tell what the temperature is of the places you're in because the usage of color and the art design is so strong.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what both you guys said, I think, at the time, everything was like browns and everything. I think there's a reason for it, why they used such murky colors. Even something like Metal Gear Solid 4 was like just dark brown. Everything was dark brown.
That's the least visually appealing Metal Gear Solid of like all time.
But then you play this game and it's just like, just these bright, vibrant colors mixing. Well, more or less, maybe they could have used a little bit more of the primary colors. But I just thought not playing it today, even the PS3, it was just like, it looks just upscale a little bit, and you could release it as like an downloadable indie game, and it'd still be just as impressive today as it was 12 years ago.
Yeah, it's begging for a bit of ray tracing, isn't it, on all those reflective surfaces. And yeah, I mean, as I said, like the prequel seems to address that sort of over basic nature by kind of adding a bit of flesh to it, but keeping that sort of very stunning, strong sort of appeal to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the sound of the footsteps, interacting with the walls, interacting with the environment, a lot of it's distinct really well, so it helps sell the motion and the immersion of being in the game. You talked about how this is one of the games from the first person perspective where you really feel like you are the character, and those little touches in the sound design really help sell that. The soundtrack, from what I understand, is good, but like you guys, I didn't really pay attention to it while I was playing. I was more entranced with the gameplay itself.
I do remember as you said, like the little like landing and rolling and all those sounds being so good, and the sound design adding to that immersion. The only song I can remember, which I know you can remember, T, is the final song, which is a very Euro poppy.
It's a very 2008-ish song.
Yeah, it's really shown his age, and really like just woke me up from the experience. Really sort of took me out of it.
But like what Joshua said, just there's certain parts in the game where you just have to run. I think the end part of the game where you have to run down the building, and she's just running. You can hear the momentum of it building up, and it's just, you felt it. You felt it. You felt the sliding. You felt the jumps. You felt the punches when you had to do fight. Like, you just felt all of it.
You feel it in your heart.
Jumping, she's grabbing something. You can just kind of feel like the pain or maybe pressure she's feeling. Just trying to lift herself up and, jumping, 2-3 stories across a gap. And she's just, that aspect was done very well.
Oh, I just want to play this game again. It's so fucking awesome.
But with that being said, if nobody else has anything else to add, we can go into our final thoughts.
Well, Tony, I'll take it from here. I'll be the first one, and I'll say, so far, I haven't been on this podcast super long. I've played a handful of games, but so far, I'd say Mirror's Edge has to be my favorite one. It has some rough edges with the story and with the combat, but the core of its design and the parkour is so good. It's so good to play. The game looks so good that it just none of those flaws. They do bring the experience down a little bit, but the core, like I said, the core is just so strong that it's gonna be an 8 out of 10 for me.
Look, I'm gonna make this really simple. This is a fun game. You like fun games? Play this game. Warts and all, 8 out of 10.
It's cool.
It's cool as. I'm gonna have to, I have a split opinion. The PS3 version, I give it a 6. I just had a terrible time, and it was just so poor.
My heart.
I was hitting all the bad notes on the console version. I was hitting it. The responsiveness wasn't that great. I was just having issues at the most simplest tasks. If you're going to play it, if you really want to play it, I highly recommend the PC version. It was very simple to get it to run. I give that version a solid 8.